Welcome to The Explainer. There's this common idea that veganism is a lifestyle that's really just for the privileged. It's a pretty popular take, right? Well, today we're going to challenge that idea and bust some of the biggest myths out there about plant-based eating.
So let me ask you something. When you picture a vegan, who do you see? I'm guessing for a lot of us, the image that pops into your head is, a white, pretty well-off person, maybe browsing the aisles at a high-end grocery store. But what if I told you the real story is way more diverse, and it's got these super deep roots in social justice movements? All right, let's just jump right in and tackle that first big myth, this idea that veganism is some kind of modern, white-centric trend. The thing is, that stereotype, it's not just kind of wrong, it completely erases a really rich history of plant-based eating in other communities, especially the Black community. And I mean, this history goes back way, way further than most people think. We're talking the 1930s, when Rastafari in Jamaica developed the Ital diet, a whole philosophy centered on living in harmony with nature. Then you jump to the 60s, and the Nation of Islam is directly connecting a plant-based diet to fighting racial oppression. So yeah, this is no modern fad. It's a legacy. And you see this connection perfectly in people like Dick Gregory. I mean, this guy was a legendary comedian and activist who literally marched with Martin Luther King Jr. And he had this famous quote, "Because I'm a civil rights activist, I am also an animal rights activist." For him, the fight for justice didn't just stop with humans. He saw the suffering of animals and people as part of the very same struggle. So when you know that history, this next number might not seem so surprising after all. A survey from 2015 found that 8% of Black Americans identify as vegetarian or vegan. Now, to put that in perspective, that's more than double the rate for the general population at the time. It just completely flips that common stereotype on its head, doesn't it? Okay, so that brings us to a second myth, and it's totally related to the first one, the myth of access. This idea that the lack of fresh, healthy food in certain communities is just, well, an unfortunate circumstance. And for years, we've had a pretty common name for these places. Right, you've definitely heard the term food desert. But here's the thing, activists like Karen Washington are saying, hold on, let's use a different term, food apartheid. And why is that? Well, it completely reframes the problem. It's not some natural accident. It's the direct result of systems and policies that are rooted in racial and economic injustice. And look, the difference between these two terms is absolutely critical. A desert, that sounds natural, empty, like it just happened. But apartheid, that word points a finger directly at human-made systems of segregation. It makes us shift our focus away from just, oh, how far is it to the grocery store, to the real underlying issues of race, class, and power that control a whole community's food system. So in response to this, there's this really powerful movement growing called food sovereignty. And this isn't about just sitting around waiting for big supermarkets to show up. No way. This is about building solutions from the ground up, led by the community itself. You've got amazing groups like Soulfire Farm and Black Urban Growers who are training new farmers, bringing back ancestral practices, and really working to give their communities direct control over their own food and their own health. Okay, but let's say we solve the access issue. We still have that third big myth to deal with, right? The idea that going plant-based is just fundamentally more expensive for the average person. I mean, it's a super common belief, and you can see why. You walk through a store, you see the prices on some of those fancy meat substitutes, or you think about stocking up on all fresh produce. It's really easy to just assume your grocery bill is going to skyrocket. But is that actually true? Is it backed by data? Well, some researchers in Portugal decided to put this exact question to the test. They went out and surveyed over 1,000 people to get real-world numbers, directly comparing the weekly grocery bills for omnivores, flexitarians, vegetarians, and vegans. And the results? Yeah, they might actually surprise you. The data showed that vegans had the biggest percentage of people in the lowest spending brackets. And on the flip side, they were the smallest group in the highest spending bracket. So the takeaway is pretty clear. This study found that going plant-based was actually linked to lower food bills, not higher ones. So when you put all these pieces of the puzzle together, you've got the deep history, the fight against food apartheid, and the actual economic reality, you start to see that for so many people, veganism is about way more than just what's for dinner. It becomes this incredibly powerful tool for rejecting systemic oppression. It's an act of taking back control, reclaiming community health, reclaiming cultural food traditions, and building a more just and sustainable food system right from the ground up. So you might be asking, what can we do? Well, the food sovereignty movement actually gives us a pretty clear roadmap. Step one is unlearning our own biases. Then it's about supporting underrepresented farmers with our wallets. And it also means pushing for policies that create real structural change.
Ultimately, looking at it this way challenges every single one of us to think differently about our own choices. It asks us to see what's on our plate, not just as a personal preference, but as our connection to a much, much bigger system, one with real social and political weight. So the question is, what role does your plate play in all this? Now that's something worth chewing on.